I transform myself into drunk elephant with a little TLC. I'm gonna take you behind the scenes from start to finish of this photo shoot. Before we begin, please subscribe and follow me on Instagram at queenshirin, where you can see more of my creative photo shoots. Okay, let's go behind the scenes. Romeo popped in to help me set up, world's best photo assistant. We pointed two Godox flashes up toward the ceiling to bounce light and put my Sony a7 III on a tripod about 6 feet behind the lights. I set the timer to 5 seconds and took a test shot. You might be wondering, Shirin, why don't you use a remote? Well, you see, I have one, but it doesn't sync with the flashes. So until then, this is how I'm getting in my cardio for the day. Test shot looks good. Here are my settings. I set my camera to manual, shutter speed 1/250 to keep me in focus in case I move, f-stop 5.6, and ISO 400. I also set my timer to 10 seconds. On top of my camera, I have my Godox transmitter for the V1 flashes. The lens I'm using is a 24-105 set to 35mm. And last but not least, I have my flashes set to 1/16. Now it's time to get into wardrobe. I got this gray matching set from F Fashion in Phuket, Thailand. It's literally perfect for this shoot because it matches the elephant costume I got from Amazon so well. We love a glam elephant moment. Now it's time for the actual shoot. I also brought a step stool to elevate myself because I want to make it look like I'm stepping on drunk elephant products in the final picture, and this will help me out in Photoshop. At this point, I was trying to avoid putting the elephant trunk on my head using the band. Apparently, that plus posing was too much thinking for my brain to handle because I forgot my martini glass. I reviewed the photo to double check for correct exposure, and everything looked good, so it was time to try again, and again, and again. This process went on for quite a bit. The main reason I avoided putting the elephant trunk over my face with the band was because I was trying to avoid messing up my makeup, but at some point I was like, okay, this is way too complicated, let me just put it on, and that made my life a lot easier. Toward the end, I had an idea to wobble around and act as if I was actually a drunk elephant to really sell the look, and it worked out so well. Since I had my shutter speed set to 1/250, my movement was captured, and in the photo I didn't look blurry. I tried it a few times and finally got the shot. Money! For fun, I had Romeo come in for a picture, but he was terrified of the elephant costume and flew away right as the shutter clicked. The shot I got was hilarious, you'll see it in a sec. By this point, I was dripping sweat from all the back and forth, so I changed back into my casual clothes to take some drunk elephant product photos. Let's get into the magic of editing. Here's the final image. These are the 3 pictures I put together from my shoot. I'm gonna walk you through how I made the edit from scratch. First, I duplicated this image by pressing Command J. I always like to have a completely unedited image as backup. I used the object selection tool and made a selection around myself, which allowed Photoshop to automatically make a selection of me. Now, this isn't always perfect, but it's a good starting point if you don't want to use the pen tool. As I zoom in, you'll see part of the stool was selected, and so on. Obviously, we don't want this in our selection. How do we unselect it? Easy. Switch over to the Quick Selection tool. From here, I'm scaling my brush size by pressing Ctrl and Option or Alt and dragging my mouse in or out. Then I'm pressing Option or Alt to choose the Subtract from Selection tool. You'll notice a minus sign shows up in the circle when you do this. From here, I'm making fine-tune adjustments, adding and subtracting selections as needed. Then I'm pressing the mask icon to create a mask on this layer. If I turn off the first layer, you'll see we now have a layer with just me on a transparent background. With the mask selected, we can now make further adjustments to the selection of me. You'll see that for the sake of the tutorial, I didn't spend time on making the mask perfect. We can mask the image in or out using the brush tool. The brush tool set to black hides the image, while white shows the image. You can quickly toggle between black and white by pressing X. To speed things up, let's pretend I'm done masking. Now I'm right-clicking on the layer and pressing Duplicate Layer. I'm gonna set the document to New and give this layer a name. You can also title the document at the bottom if you want. When I press OK, it's going to place this layer on a new document. I'm gonna scale myself down using the Move tool, then select the Crop tool. Since I'm creating this image for Instagram, I'm setting the aspect ratio to 4:5. This will allow me to edit knowing that every element will be in frame. Now, going back to the 2 other images, I'm repeating the object select and mask process, then duplicating the layer into our new document. Okay, so now we have me, Romeo, and the products on separate transparent layers. For the sake of using better masked images, I'm gonna bring in the edited layers from my final project. You'll notice that originally the skincare products were much larger and in front of me, so we can scale down the size using the Move tool. Then, to put the products behind me, I'm dragging the products layer below the me layer. Alright, now I'm selecting the bottom layer, pressing shift, and selecting the top layer to select all the layers and pressing the folder icon to put them all in a folder. We'll name this me plus products plus Romeo. Next, I want to adjust the color of these images, so I'm going to go to adjustments and press hue saturation. This will create an adjustment layer in our layers panel. From here, you can either adjust all the colors or select individual colors, which is what I'm going to do. As I'm making adjustments, you'll see that it's affecting all the layers in the folder we just made. This is a quick way to color instead of making individual adjustments on each layer. Next, I'm selecting the color balance adjustment layer and making some changes to my midtones. This is all personal preference, but I'm mainly warming up the image. Now I'm right-clicking on the hue saturation adjustment layer and pressing Create Clipping Mask. This is going to apply the adjustments only to the folder below it. This is important because we're going to add images behind these layers that we don't want to be affected. I'm doing the same thing with the color balance layer. I'm going to select everything, put this into another folder, and name it Me plus Products plus Romeo to make the layers panel more organized. Next, I'm going to bring in the background image I used for this edit. I found it on Unsplash. I think I just searched for Safari. It is shot by David Claude, so shout out David for helping my vision come to life. I scaled up the image to fill the frame, but let me scale it down so you can see how the whole thing looks. I had a hard time finding a vertical shot with a similar vibe, so I was like, okay, this works. I placed this tree off to the side because I knew I was going to be in the center and I didn't want the tree coming out of my head or anything like that. I'm just going to cancel this so it'll go back to how I originally had it. Now I'm dragging the Safari layer to the bottom of the layers panel so it'll become the background. Then I'm duplicating it by pressing Command J. We're going to blur this to fake some depth, so I'm going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'll keep the radius at 7 pixels, that looks good. And press OK. So now, when I toggle this layer on and off, you can see the difference. But I don't want the blur effect on this bottom part, so we're going to mask that out. With my brush tool set to black and the opacity at 100, I'm painting 2 lines over the bottom. Then I'm going to drop down my opacity to 30% and draw 2 more lines on top of the ones I just made to help blend the blur and create a more seamless look. Now, when I toggle the duplicate layer on and off, you see it's mainly affecting the trees in the back. I'm putting these 2 layers in a folder and naming it Safari Background. I do want to make some color changes to the background, so I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer and create a clipping mask just like we did before. Then I'm going to put all of that in another folder called Background. When we open up the folder, you see everything is nice and organized in there. Let's duplicate this folder by right-clicking on it and pressing Duplicate Group. Let me close some of these so it's not so cluttered. I'm going to drag the background copy folder to the top and delete this layer with the mask background, then add a mask to the remaining layer. With the paint bucket tool set to black, I'm filling in the mask. Okay, so now we see everything. What I want to do here is make it look like the brush or grass or whatever it is covering the sides of the product so it looks more realistic. For this, I'm using the brush tool with the color set to white and the opacity at 30. There is no science to this. I'm messing around with it until it looks good to me. You can adjust the opacity if you want to, and change the brush size. It also helps to zoom out and get a look at the whole image because sometimes you lose perspective when you're too zoomed in. This is more or less the bulk of the edit. I'm going to bring in my dodge and burn and adjustments folders from the final edit and show you what I did. Okay, so let's turn these off for a sec. Here's what dodge and burn does, and then the adjustments are some minor global color changes. When I open up the dodge and burn folder, you'll see I have 1 layer for dodge and another for burn. What I'm basically doing here is adding shadows with burn and highlights with dodge. You can see them as I toggle the layers. So let's say I want to add more shadows. I'm going to select the burn tool, set the range to shadows, adjust the exposure to 58, and paint wherever I want shadows. This is extreme, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Usually I keep the exposure in the low 20s. It's much more subtle. I'm going to add some shadow in the field to make it look like my body's shadow. Let's also add some on the products and below my shoe. You get the point. For highlights, I'm going to select the dodge layer and switch to the dodge tool. Same concept here. I'm going to brush in wherever I want to add highlights. This is an easy way to make your subject or objects pop. Now let's toggle on the adjustments folder. The difference is so subtle it's hardly noticeable, but here are the adjustment layers I have in here: curves, vibrance, and a photo filter. And that's it, I have reached my final drunk elephant form. I love that Romeo's in the picture, it looks so funny. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy seeing the behind the scenes of my photo shoots, and please subscribe for more. Stay tuned for next week's video, which is my hair and makeup tutorial for this photo shoot. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!